Olson, I'm the crop economist, marketing specialist with NDSU Extension. I'm here to talk about 26 crop outlook. Before I start, there's some things I want to make sure we set the stage on. So number one, my job is to try and help you understand what's happening in the marketplace. Okay, to try and understand what are the traders and analysts and everybody talking about. Is it a big deal, a little deal? What do you try and focus on? If you want my opinion, I'm fine with that. I'll share my opinion, but just understand my opinion isn't any worse or better than yours. I mean, we're all looking forward, right? We're all trying to say what's coming next. And guys, believe it or not, I'm not clairvoyant. I'm sorry, I can't see into the future. I don't have a time machine. Now, I might have a little different perspective. I might have a different viewpoint. And if that's the case, let's talk about that. So I'm going to ask you a lot of questions. I want this to be participation. I hate lectures. I don't want to lecture. I would rather have a conversation. So I'm going to ask you questions. Hopefully you'll ask me questions. If you think of a question, holler out. Let's answer it while you're thinking about it. Okay? Let's have a conversation. You don't have to wait till the end. Now we got a lot to go through. I got like 186 slides. We should be out of here by 5 o'clock. No. I'm only going to go through a handful of them, but if you do have questions, I probably have a slide on it. Because as people ask questions, I try and look it up, and I have slides that we can show you, and you can see pictures. All right, so let's dig in. Let's start what's going on. So obviously on Monday, we had 5 big USDA reports. It's a massive data dump. It happens every year. Inevitably, there's something in those 5 reports that causes people to get some anxiety. This time, there was essentially 2 numbers that caused the grain markets to go down on Monday. Corn had the biggest drop. Soybeans, part of it was a drop because of corn, but part of it's because of what happened in soybeans. So I'm going to try and explain that so at least you understand what happened and where we are today. So the other thing that I always try and do is give you some perspective, some context. You listen to the markets on the radio, they interview the market analysts and stuff, and they're throwing all these numbers around. You say, God, what is that? Is that a big number, a little number? You know, when they say 12 million metric ton to China, is that a big number or a little number? I don't know. Well, I'm going to try and give you some reference points. So this is planted area in the United States going back 25 years. The golden line on top is corn, the green one is soybeans, the brown one is wheat. Now that's all wheat blended together, spring wheat, winter wheat, durum, white wheat, soft wheat, everything, right? And then we got kind of a bunch on the bottom. So when we talk about the big 3 crops, it's really corn, soybeans, and wheat. And technically we could look at wheat and pull that apart into spring wheat versus winter wheat. I'm not going to do that quite yet. I will later on. Now, I will tell you right now, the fundamental reason we have so much corn around is because we increased our acreage. And we had very good yields. We had very good yields, but the main reason is we increased our acres. Now,
but it looks like at expense to the soybean acres.
Yep, okay, so let's talk about that. You see, at least for the last several years, you see kind of a flip-flop back and forth between corn and soybeans, right? Corn goes up, soybean goes down, soybean goes up, corn goes down. Why is that?
There's only so many acres.
What's that?
There's only so many acres.
Yeah, but okay, but if you take all the corn acres, we usually have a little over 90 million acres of corn, a little under 90 million acres of soybeans. It's about 180 million acres, you add them together. We got 360 million acres of cropland in the United States. So about half of our acres is corn and beans, the other half is everything else. We got plenty of acres to go around. Now the challenge is they're not growing. We have the same amount of acres this year as pretty much as we've had for quite a while, plus or minus a little. Okay, so why do we see the flip-flop back and forth between corn and beans? It's because of the Corn Belt, right? So before I came back to NDSU, so I worked at NDSU, I farmed, I left, got my PhD, I came back. Before I came back to NDSU, I worked about 2 years at Iowa State. And I'm going to be a little kind of a smart aleck here, and I said, all right. So I did extension meetings there too, and I looked at a farmer in Iowa and said, okay, if you can't grow corn and you can't grow soybeans, what are you going to grow? And they said, what else is there? I mean, seriously, he was like stunned. I don't know, what else is there? Well, again, you live in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, eastern Nebraska, southern Minnesota. I mean, it's all corn and beans. Now you get outside of that area, you get in the transition zones. You get in North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Missouri, Kentucky, even into Ohio. They can flip-flop into a lot of different things, just like we can. Okay, but the reason, now, what I'm trying to get at is just because we gain 1 million acres of corn doesn't mean we automatically lose 1 million acres of soybeans. And let me point out 1 year. So here's 2019. Why did we see such a big drop in soybean acres in 2019? Trade war number one, remember? Trade war number one started in 18. Soybean prices stunk. Nobody planted beans. They planted something else. But they didn't plant corn either, did they? Right? Now, what do you think is going to happen next year? What do you think is going to happen in a couple months when we start planting again? So call it February, March, April, 3 months. Guys down south are going to start planting corn again. They're going to start planting beans 3 months from now. What do you think is going to happen to planted acres for corn and soybeans? Nationally, not locally. How about nationally?
I think there's still going to be a lot of corn.
There's still going to be a lot of corn. Regardless, there's going to be a lot of corn.
The
But
seed salesman told me he sold more corn so far now than he did this time.
now be very careful. I think in North Dakota, we're going to be different than the rest of the nation. I think in North Dakota, we're going to see more corn acres. I think we're going to see less spring wheat acres. I think we're going to see about the same amount of soybean acres. We might see a slight increase in canola acres, but not necessarily up in the Northeast. It's going to be in the South and the Southwest. Their acreage will shift to a different part of the state. Yeah?
2019, when the corn acres were down and bean acres were down, what went up instead? The rest of your crops didn't go up. What went on with the ground that wasn't put in the corn or beans?
Prevent plant, wasn't it?
What's that?
Prevent plant.
There was some prevent plant, not enough to make up that difference. There was some prevent plant. But we did see so here's the thing, and this is, okay, there wasn't one crop. There wasn't one crop. We added 500,000 acres of rice. We added, and I don't know the exact numbers, we added 1 million acres worth of sorghum. We added 1 million acres worth of cotton. We added. It got divided up over a bunch of different crops.
Doesn't show on your chart.
It doesn't, because I don't have all the crops. Remember I said?
Well, you got rice and barley.
I do, but they went up by a little bit. So let's look at cotton. Look, cotton acres did go up. But if cotton acres go up and barley acres go up and rice acres go up, you can chew up that easily.
Oh,
It's not one crop.
okay, well,
It got divided over like 5 crops. That's why you don't see it as a big bump. It's not like all the soybean guys suddenly went into cotton.
yeah, North Dakota.
Well, even in Iowa, right? So right now the going thought process is, and I'll show you the numbers in just a second, the going thought process will drop corn acres nationally. I think locally it'll go up. We're going to increase soybean acres, so we'll have about, right now the most common number is about 95 million acres of corn, about 85 million acres of soybeans, probably 44 million acres of wheat. I'll show you the reference points in a minute. I'll talk about them again in a minute. So basically, all we're going to do is kind of go back to what we saw a couple years ago. We saw a shift last year. It'll probably go back to where we were a couple years ago. That's the thought process. Now, as a marketing guy, these are the numbers I look at. The gold line on top is corn bushels. This is bushels produced. Green line is soybeans. Brown line is wheat. And then you can see the other crops on the bottom. Now we just, based on the USDA numbers out of the January report, we produced a 17 billion bushel corn crop. 17. Okay, so let's put that in perspective. So when we say corn is king, this is what we're talking about. Right? I mean, we produce more corn bushels than anything else by far. So to give you perspective, the previous record corn production was 2 years ago in 2023. So if you take that number and look at the increase, how much do we increase our record? 1.68 billion bushels, 1.68. Last year we produced about 2 billion bushels of wheat. Our entire wheat crop was 2. We increased corn by 1.7 from the previous record. Okay? This is a monster corn crop, period. I don't care how you do the math. USDA could have dropped the yield or dropped the acres. We still would have had corn coming out of our ears, pun intended. Okay? Now, it wasn't like we had a crappy soybean year either, was it?
Not nationally.
What's that?
Not nationally.
Not nationally. Locally we sure did, but not nationally. And it's the national numbers that count when it comes to prices. Okay? All right, so let's go through the details. I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. I don't want to go too deep into this because we'll be here all day.
One more comparison.
Yes, sir, please.
So how are those two crops compared to this Brazil, South American crop total?
Okay, let's answer that question right now. You asked for it. I'm going to find it here. Give me a second. I just got to find the right spot. Where'd it go?
I'd accept your memory.
No, I want to show you. I want to show you the picture here. I got to find the picture. Where'd it go? It's coming up right after this stuff. Should be right. Nope, not there. God darn it. It's up here. Where'd it go? There's canola. There's Brazil.
It's on the other computer.
No, it's not. Here it is. Okay, so let's talk about this because this plays into it. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and we'll come back to what happens in the U.S. So here's a map of where corn is produced globally. Okay, the darker the green, the more bushels. And you can see there's some kind of light pale green in areas like here in China. So the U.S. is the biggest producer of corn when you count bushels. China's number 2 from a bushel standpoint. So this is where we grow corn. Here's the numbers. Green line is U.S. corn production. Red is China's corn production. Blue is Brazil corn production. That's how many bushels we produce. This is how much they export. So let's go back. China doesn't export corn. They grow it. They grow a lot of it. In fact, their planted acres of Chinese corn is about the same as the U.S. The only difference is their yields are much lower. And about almost 3 years ago now, they allowed GM corn to be planted. In fact, they're encouraging it. So I do expect in the next couple of years, you're going to start to see this total corn bushels coming out of China start to increase. But they need it. Okay, now who exports corn? Green line is the United States. The blue line is Brazil. They're not producing as much, but they're exporting a lot because they don't have a home for all of it domestically. So if they produce more corn, they got to export it to find a home. We've got competition. So we're number 1 in corn. Brazil's number 2. Argentina, which is the black line, is number 3. And then you got Ukraine and Russia. Those are the top 5 corn exporters. Okay, let's look at a map for soybeans, global soybeans. Well, obviously the United States and Brazil and Argentina. India actually produces a lot of soybeans. China produces some, but most of that's food grade. It's for tofu and soy milk and like it's for human food, not crushing an animal food. Who's the number 1 producer of soybeans on the globe? Brazil. And they passed us 10 years ago in total bushels produced. Okay, then it's the U.S., then it's Argentina, then we get to China for production. Okay, now who exports? Okay, the blue line is Brazil, the green line is the United States. So those are exports, whole soy. The black line is Argentina, the purple line is Paraguay. Argentina produces a lot of soybeans, but they crush them first. They don't export whole soybeans, they crush them and then export the oil and the meal. The red line is the amount of soybeans that China buys from everybody. The blue line is how much the soybeans Brazil sells to everybody. The green is how much we sell to everybody. Okay? So I'm jumping ahead, but does Brazil have to buy soybeans from us? They don't have to. They would like to. Why would they want to buy from the U.S. instead of somebody else? About 4 months out of the year, we're the cheapest place to come. There's about 4 months where we're the cheapest place. So they don't have to buy it from us, but if they don't, it's going to be a lot more expensive. Okay? This is wheat. This is global wheat production. Yeah, wow is right. So when they say that there's probably wheat harvest 12 months out of the year globally, this is what they're talking about. And realize spring wheat, most of this up here is spring wheat. Most of the other rest of the world is winter wheat. Not all of it, but a big chunk of it. Okay, so who produces wheat globally? I mean, here's the United States right here for wheat production. Number one is usually China, not always, but European Union. Now, European Union is like 28 countries, so that's all of them blended together. But the EU and China are number one or number two. India is usually number 3, 2 or 3, usually 3. Russia, United States, Canada, and Australia for production. How about exports? So if we go back 20 years, back here, the United States was king. Black line is us. What's happened? Everybody else caught up. So here's one of the things I got to get through to you really, really as clearly as I can. I don't want to beat you over the head with this. But guys, yes, there's this comment, well, we're not making any more new land. And that's absolutely true, unless you live by a volcano where it erupts and you wait another 100 years and then you can farm it. But we have a lot of land in the globe that's not producing to its potential. That can do better than it is. And Russia is one of those. They have some exceptionally productive land. It's just not being farmed well. They don't have the inputs, they don't have the science, they don't have the incentives to grow and do what they need to do. You know, and they've been here for a few years. They've been really kicking butt. Now, long term, I'm not as concerned about Russia today as I was, let's say, 2 or 3 years ago. Why? Because right now, essentially, the Russian government has taken over their entire wheat industry. So it'll just be a few years before they screw it up and they are not going to be able to produce and export anything. Did that answer your question? More than you wanted, but...
Oh, it scares me.
It does. It does. Okay, so let me go back. So here's where we are. All right, let's talk about what USDA came out with. Now again, I'm not going to go through all these numbers. The column over here in red, that's the numbers we got on Monday. And USDA updates these numbers every month. It's just sometimes they tweak over here, sometimes they tweak over here. The column in blue is from last year and the column in green is 2 years ago. So the column in red, this is on a marketing year, so it's from harvest to harvest. So the red numbers is the harvest we just got done with. That's the grain that's in the bin right now. Unless it had a birthday and it's some grain from over here. But we're going to count it as over here. Okay, so what's happened to planted area? 94.5, about 91, 98.8, almost 99. Now, the current forecasters, the private analysts are about back to 95. So we're going to probably go back to something like that. That's the current guess. Right? Now, what about yields? 177, 179, 186.5. Now, there's a lot of marketing guys that really poke fun at the 186.5. I'm going to use this and then I'm going to come back one. What they're forgetting about, and this drives me nuts, because these are marketing guys, not folks that work with production ag. They forget about trend line. Okay, so for you guys in the room, I think about wheat, you can think about corn. So let's pick on corn for a minute. What was your average corn yield 20 years ago?
75.
What's your average corn yield today? You don't have to say. Much higher.
Over twice.
Over twice. Okay, and what are you expecting next year?
Just as much.
Just as much. Okay, so when we talk about today's yield, we have to do, is it better or worse than trend line? I mean, I don't want to look at, like, if I do an average, if I do a 30-year average, what's going to happen is I'm going to get a line like this, and we're going to be like, 40 bushels above average. Well, that's not true. So if you think about the red line, which is our actual yield, the USDA put out, and I'll explain how they do that in a minute, and then you look at the blue line, which is the trend line. We're just a little bit above average. I mean, we had a good corn crop. It was a little above average. That's it. And guess what's going to happen next year? The average is going to go up again. Okay? So we had 186.5, and the trend line is about 185. Woo! Come on, guys. So this was the January numbers. Here was the December numbers. Let me explain why corn went down 20 cents, 25 cents on Monday, so that you guys understand what happened and why. All right, so planted area. In December, they said 98.7. We got 98.8. Really didn't move the needle. Average yield, 186, 186.5. Really didn't move the needle. Now, most private analysts, most private forecasters, the guys doing recommendations, said, well, I don't think USDA is going to mess around with these. They usually don't mess around with planted and harvested area. We think we're going to take that down to about 184. So we'll get less bushels. Well, they didn't drop the yield, but look what they did to harvested area. They went from 90 to 93.1. We added 1.3 million acres of corn harvested for grain. What happened? That was the shocker. And what drives me nuts, so I was driving from Fargo out to western North Dakota. I've been out in western North Dakota all week. I'm literally driving out, listening to the radio, listening to the guys doing the market interviews. Some trader out of Chicago was saying, well, yeah, USDA screwed up. Everybody was expecting a lower number, and USDA increased everything. And of course, what happened was he's mad, and this was just not one, but there was two of these guys. They're mad because they were expecting to drop. They made recommendations to all their customers. We think prices will go up a little bit. Hold off and wait. And all of a sudden, USDA didn't meet what they thought they were going to say. And it's USDA's fault. It's USDA's fault because they didn't follow what I thought they were going to do. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain. What happened with USDA? Why is this January report for yield and everything so important? Up until this point, the information about planted acres, harvested acres, and yield are primarily from surveys of you guys. They're surveying you guys saying, what do you see? Now we know they know you lie. Come on, they know that. They're not stupid. And they correct for that, by the way.
They've been lied to before.
They have been. They have been. Okay. Now on the yield side, they also cross-check with satellite imagery. They say, well, what's crop condition look like? And then later on, just before harvest, they actually send people out to the field and actually take samples, just like a crop insurance adjuster will do. Okay? But here's the little secret, and I do this when I do forecasting as well. We usually take this planted area, we know that because you guys survey it, and we got some cross checks with FSA and RMA, right? Late in the season, that's why the January numbers are so important, because late in the season, they'll survey you guys, And they'll cross-check the survey. After you're all done, say, well, what did you say? And then they're going to check it with RMA and FSA. So if you happen to lie or misrepresent your survey, what happens? Yep, it gets thrown out. Now, if you put the wrong number down on your RMA or your FSA forms, now what happens? You can get into a lot of trouble. If you did it purposefully, that's fraud. You will go to jail, at a minimum pay a bunch of fines. You may end up doing time. So we know that the RMA and the FSA data is probably pretty damn accurate because they do cross-check that, right? Now, they're not saying, oh, well, you reported this over here and you said this on your FSA form, you said this in your... That's not what they're doing. They're looking at averages. Looking at county averages, state averages, and say, look, do these things match up? And they never are equal. They're never perfect. Because there are farmers that don't take crop insurance. There are farmers that don't go into the farm program. Now, not up here, but in the south and the southeast especially. And these are national numbers, right? So in the January report, they have all that data. Okay? Now, before that, they don't. So they make estimates. Okay, now, normally what we have some pretty good information on planted area. But what about harvested area? How do we estimate harvested area? We look back historically, right? And we got historical relationships. So let's think about soybeans first, and I'll come back to corn. On soybeans, when you look at planted area versus harvested area, there's about a 1 to 1.5% difference nationally. And I've done it at the state level. It's about the same thing for state. Why would there be a difference between planted and harvested area? Drowned out. Could be drought. It could be hailstorm. I mean, it's just, there are acres that, that aren't worth harvesting. That happens every year. But it's usually 1 to 1.5%. If you do the math here, this is like 9 or 9.5%. So why is there always, every year, consistently such a big difference between planted and harvested area on corn?
Silage.
Silage. Bingo. So it wasn't until we got the harvested area, primarily from crop insurance, but also from FSA, that USDA actually knew how many acres of corn silage was actually chopped. Before that, they were just taking the standard percentage. So you take 98.7 million acres times about 0.91, and you get the harvested area. Guess what? They overestimated silage for two reasons. Number one, this number is bigger than normal. So by taking a flat percentage, they assumed that if you planted more corn acres for grain, you also planted more corn for silage. And that's not always the case, right?
Not with a screwworm. No cattle coming from Mexico.
Okay, we're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, so the other thing, we had a very good corn yield, didn't we? What does that mean for silage yields? Very good. So what happens? You're going along, you start on your worst corn, you chop it into silage, you start filling the pile. Once the pile is full, what do? Quit. And if you got better yields, it fills up faster. Which means what? You got more corn, it runs through the combine. Guys, this is not rocket science. But I missed it. I didn't even think about that. And there's a lot of the private analysts and traders don't know that. I mean, it didn't even pop into their brains. And so all of a sudden they came up and said, well, wait a minute. You increased planted area by 100,000 acres and you increased harvested area by 1.3 million acres. How does that work? And I said, duh, it's easy. It's corn silage. USDA overestimated the amount of corn silage. That's it. The math works. And we don't get that data until when? January. So we don't know that there's an error until January. Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
I don't want to sound too dumb, but on
No.
the planted acres,
Yep.
shouldn't they have that number? Because everybody's acreage is reported by the middle of July. shouldn't that be a fairly solid number for them to go on? I mean, yeah, we talked.
No, okay, so let's answer that. No, so let's answer that. Let's answer that. And that's, so when earlier on in the season, so in March, they do a survey, say, well, how many acres do you think you're going to plant? And then in June, they do another survey and say, well, how much did you actually plant? And again, there's still some fudge in there, right? Because you get the form, and if you do fill out the form, most of the time it goes in the trash. But if you do get it, you just kind of jot down a number close enough, you send it in. Okay, and again, by averaging out in the sampling systems, they can adjust for some of that. So when do you certify your acres for FSA?
August 1st.
August 1st. When do you do it for RMA? Middle end of July? No, later? August? I forget the exact dates. They keep moving on.
July 15th.
July and 15th, okay? Okay, so remember I said they cross-check only in January. Only in January they cross-check. But they do watch, especially FSA reporting. Now, just because you report doesn't mean FSA gets the number out in a day. I mean, you report it to the county has to average it all up, they report it into the state has to average it all up, they report. It takes a while. And some states are faster than other states. And oh, by the way, if you haven't noticed, the budget for USDA has been slipping, and they fired a bunch of people. They're running a little thin right now. They weren't really robust to start with, and they're running pretty thin now. I guarantee you, because I know some of the guys that work not only in the state, but also in the DC office. And they're trying to figure out how they're going to do all this. Okay? So some of this gets a little slower. So yeah, theoretically, they would know that earlier. But if you've been watching this like I have, this number, this planted area number, every month, and they don't do it in December, they kind of stop in November. Every month it's been going up a little bit as they get more and more certified acres from FSA and RMA. Because the survey was a little low.
So, on the WASDE report come out, and the price of corn dropped to 25 cents.
Yep,
And then each day since then, it's come back up.
a little bit. I'll show you the charts.
Is that a dead cat bounce, or are you, what's the explanation that you can drop
Okay.
something 25 cents in one day?
Yeah.
And then it turns around, comes back up slowly?
It's called overexuberance.
Oh.
It's the shock value, right? Something happened. So they were expecting, let me go back. They were expecting, I didn't have the exact number. The number before this was 16.8. They were expecting that to go down to about 16.6. It went up above 17. That was like a, oh my God, what just happened?
Yeah.
And so what happens when you have a panic? Everybody runs for the gate. Let's get out of this as fast as possible. And the market swings a little too far. And then they go home at night and they think about it and they start running the numbers and say, well, maybe we kind of overdid this. Oh, and by the way, what also happens when the price crashes? What do the buyers do?
Jump on.
It's like, oh, here's a heck of a buy. I didn't expect that coming. Even though I might not need more corn, I'm going to buy some just because it is cheap. It's on sale. Buying interest comes back. People realize it's like, well, okay, I guess here's the new number, so the shock value wears off, and we get a recovery.
Yeah, it should be a warning shot.
Okay, so now, I'm going to hold off the rest of your question. If I don't answer it, bring it back up. So now the question is, so what happens moving forward? So I'm just trying to explain why it crashed. Why did we dive off a cliff? And then what happens? Okay? So let's talk about carryover stocks. So I'm gonna spend quite a bit of time talking about this. So let's look at the bottom line. Now these are our actual numbers. This is an estimate. How much grain are we going to have left in the bin just before harvest? And that number psychologically has a really, really important factor. So let me go through this. So the blue bars here, I spent a lot of time, that's percentages here. What we're doing is taking this divided by that. So what percent of our total needs are we going to have in reserve? It's just a measure. Okay, so if the blue bars are really small, we're coming in on fumes. The bins are darn near empty at the end of the year.
That includes the exports?
That includes in exports and everything. So how much are we going to have left in the bin, whether it be in your bin or a commercial bin, coming into harvest? If the bins are empty coming into harvest, would you expect prices to be high or low? High, okay? What about price volatility? What about how sensitive? Are they bouncing around a lot, or are they nice and calm and steady? Bouncing. They're bouncing like crazy. Why are they bouncing like crazy? Well, when prices get super high, I mean, what we're trying to do is cut off usage, right? Well, if prices get really high and say, man, this is shorter than we thought, it's like, well, I really got to crank up prices to get people to change their habits. If we find out there's a little more than we thought, even a little bit, all of a sudden it comes crashing down. Everybody says, oh, whew, we don't have a disaster. Now let's flip that around. Let's pick a year. Actually, there's a series of years from about 2015 through 2020 where we had pretty big supplies. The bins were full coming into harvest. Do we expect high prices or low prices? Low. What about price volatility? Are they going to be going nuts and bouncing around, or are they going to be nice and quiet and stable? Stable.
Low and stable.
Low and stable. Now, what you guys always want, because you call me and complain. Surprise. You call me and complain. You say, well, when prices are up here, it's like, Frayne, things are going wild. I mean, they're up and down 50 cents a day. How do I market in this? I'm going, well, very carefully. Okay, and the prices come down. It's nice and stable. And you say, well, God, there's no movement here.
No opportunity.
There's no opportunity. What the heck? So what you want is high prices that are stable. It doesn't work that way, guys. You're never going to have that. I'm sorry.
They just come complacent then anyway.
Well, yeah, they just like to complain. Okay. So, and I do want you to remember 2015 through 2020. We're going to come back to it kind of at the end and talk about that. So let's look at the red bar. That's the current USDA forecast for ending stocks. How does the red bar compare to history? Where are we?
Average.
Average to maybe a little above average. I would say probably a little above average. So what does that mean for prices and price volatility?
Low and stable.
Low and stable, and you know what? It could get worse. And that's what happened on Monday. It got worse.
How much of that carryover is required to keep the system working?
How much is... It's a great question. I mean, right, so the lowest we've had, percentage-wise, that's why I always use a percent. Because the numbers keep changing, right? Because look, as production goes up, consumption goes up. That's the way this works, right? The lowest we've had in U.S. history, at least going back into the 70s.
In your lifetime?
Well, I could go back further, but it would be kind of irrelevant. Okay? The lowest we've had in modern history, let's put it that way. 2012. And that was about, if I remember right, about 6.8%, something like that.
6.8.
Something, I think that's it.
20-day supply.
Something like that. It's pretty thin.
Back in 04, 05 there, you see where the bar is way up there. And then they had the price drop.
Okay, I'll do you one better. You know what the number was in 1986? Because I just cleaned this off. I went back further. 1986 was kind of the peak, the opposite, one of the highest in modern history, was 67% carryover. That was the old CCC grain reserve days. You know how you made money? You guys remember. You know how you made money in those days? LDPs and grain storage. The government paid you to store your own grain. That's how you made cash flow.
And the cattle guy was buying corn for $1.50 and just dumping it on the ground because he didn't care.
Well, he didn't. The beef prices were cheap too. Now, that's one of the reasons we shifted policy and we brought things back down again. That was this pick and roll. Remember the old guys, pick and roll, how we brought the inventories down? We won't go into history. We'll bore the young guys to death. Let's move on. What about soybeans? Okay. 83.6, 87.3, 81.2. We had a big shift. And again, if you do the math, that's about 1.5%. But our yield went from 50.6, 50.7, 53. 53 is pretty much right on trend line, guys. I mean, we had nationally an average soybean crop. And you say, yeah, but in my area we sure didn't. I'm sorry, guys, but if you take, at least on corn, I did the math on corn. If you take and increase Iowa's corn production by 15 bushels an acre, that's equivalent to all the corn we produce in North Dakota. And they had more than 15 bushels an acre increase above average. We're important. We're more important in soybeans. But guys, the Corn Belt is still the Corn Belt. Okay? How about total bushels produced? We had much less acres. We had trend line yield. What happened to our total bushels? About the same. I mean, we're kind of right in the middle between 2 years ago and last year. We had a normal soybean crop. What about inventories? Now now one of the things is, notice this drop right here in total bushels produced. That was because acreage dropped. This is our trade war number one. So you got to kind of throw those out. And the reason that we had such big inventories, trade war number one, the timing was different. Right? We'd already harvested everything before the trade war hit. This time we kind of saw it coming. So the industry adjusted. So let's throw those out. How does the red bar compare to history without 18 and 19?
A little bit above average.
Yep, kind of the same thing. Average or maybe a little above average. Guys, we're normal. How about wheat? 49.6 million acres, 46.3, 45.4. Remember what I said? Next year about 44. Now, the winter wheat seedings report, which also came out on Monday, said basically exactly the same acreage of winter wheat this year as last year. Everybody's saying, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. But I'm saying, yes, it does. For both soft red, which is the Illinois wheat, Illinois, Kentucky, Michigan, as well as the hard red winter, which is Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado. So what did the winter wheat guys do? They planted planted winter wheat. And what are they doing with their stocker cattle? They're grazing them. Now, this year, given wheat prices being super cheap and cattle prices being super high, do you think they'll graze them down to nothing? You're darn right they will. So just because it got planted doesn't mean it's going to get harvested. It'll probably get ripped up and planted into something different next spring. And I think the